hey, hey, oh, hey, ha. When, hey, hey, oh, when, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. When hey hey oh hey ha, when hey oh hey oh hey, when hey hey oh hey ha, when hey hey oh hey oh, way ah eh no, way oh way oh hey, when hey hey oh hey ha. When hey oh, when hey oh, hey oh, hey. When hey oh, hey ha. When hey oh, hey. When hey oh, hey ha. When hey oh, hey oh, way oh, way oh, hey. When hey oh, hey ha. When hey oh, when hey oh, hey oh, hey oh.
Hi, everyone. Happy Friday the 13th. I hope you are well and thriving despite these ever challenging times. I'm Avery Willis Hoffman, Program Director at the Park Avenue Armory. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm joining you all today from New London, New Hampshire, the occupied and unceded homeland of the Abenaki, the Wabanaki, and the Pennacook peoples. I am a mixed race woman with brownish golden, short curly hair, wearing a gray and black top, red lipstick, turquoise earrings with a beige wall as background behind me. A special thank you to Josie for that beautiful welcome song entitled Deep Snow. And thank you and Muriel for being with us today. All of our conversations are framed by our acknowledgement of the native stewards of the lands on which we presently live. We pay deep respect to all of their ancestors, as well as present and future generations. And we acknowledge that many Indigenous people continue to live and work on these lands, and we honor their ongoing contributions to our world. On behalf of Park Avenue Armory and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, we're so pleased to welcome you back to our 100 Years, 100 Women conversation series. Many thanks to those of you who have joined us for our first 7 episodes. These summer Friday gatherings have just been a wonderful way to touch base with the artists and participants of this project. And this has been our year-long response to the centennial of the 19th Amendment to the US Constitution, which, as you know, granted some, but not all women the right to vote. So please feel free to grab a beverage and food and participate in the YouTube chat, post your questions there throughout the conversation. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jonathan, our host from the National Black Theater, one of our great partners in this project, for a few words of welcome, and then on to the conversation with Muriel and Josephine. So Jonathan, take it away.
Hello. Hi, everyone. It's really great and awesome to really think about and consider how we will be building together, how we will be able to utilize this time with these 2 brilliant humans to really examine and interrogate and also celebrate just where we are as a society and what we can possibly do to lean into this very a necessary moment of awareness. What does awareness actually mean? How does awareness also potentially create violence? And how do we then begin to string all of that together to create a more holistic society? And that's what we hope to kind of gleam at today. I know it's a lot to do on a Friday. Friday 13th are kind of wacky, so why not go there? Why not be bold and audacious with our vision and what we can talk about? So without further ado, I want to bring the beautiful panelists, or I consider friends, family, up on to this wonderful opportunity for us to engage and talk about. So Mary and Helena, please join up and let's begin to have this conversation. So without further ado, do y'all want to talk a little bit about, so the folks out there who might not know who you are, what you do you guys want to talk us a little bit about the work that you guys have been stewarding for such a very long period of time, and what it means for this moment, and talking about contextually this moment of the pandemic, but also contextually with this moment of, as I was talking about, awareness.
Hello, my name is, if you don't know who I am, my name is Muriel Borst Tarrant. I'm Kunan Rappahannock, and I am a New York City community member my entire life. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and the work I do is really about community work of in urban issues and what does that mean to us and how do we build allyships. I'm a theater maker, an actress, a playwright, I guess if you want to use playwright, but I never, that's a hard one, but I always say I'm a writer because I write, you know, and I think of and I'm a director, and I am the artistic director of Safe Harbors New York City, which is it started as a program at La Mama. And because we were looking for different places to have a home and who would understand us. And there was a bunch of stuff going on in New York City at the time. And so me and Mia, who are, we've known each other for a very long time, she said, well, why don't we start a program here called Safe Harbors, where it would be a safe space, right? For different Native people internationally, nationally. At the time I was at the UN, where we could come together. We decided that we would now would call Safe Harbors New York City, because we're now specific about social impact of theater, what theater means, what do artists mean to us. We are an ensemble, repertory ensemble theater company. What does that mean in our way? How do we direct in our way? How do we present the way we were taught? You know what? We're on a not new program. We have a Feast of Ghosts, which is one of our projects. And so that is about not only community building, but talking about the land that you're on. And I got the idea from Gangs of New York, believe it or not. And looking at Gangs of New York, that last shot of Gangs of New York with the two graves, and people are burying over the grave, burying over the grave, burying over the grave. And I said, that's what this is. That's what New York City's like. We weren't featured on this, but what were we doing at this time? What was our community doing at this time? And just think about all of the blood spent and the graves of my generations before me spent on this land. And what does that mean? What does that mean not only for me, but for other people who don't acknowledge land? We're just going through finding out about uncovered buried bodies, right, with children in boarding schools. And to me, we've been talking about this for years about boarding school and what that means. But talking about those spirits and those things that we need as not only as a community, but how do we mourn as a community? Because we just had huge deaths. So what in our communities, what does that mean when those are not mourned? Yeah. What does that mean spiritually to us? Because we come from all these different tribes. And what does that mean? So that is the next project. And I'm very happy. Should I introduce my daughter? Or do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, please.
So my name is Tinu Josephine Tarrant. I'm also Kunan Rappahannock, and I'm Hopi and Ho-Chunk on my father's side. And yeah, pretty much I am the interior managing director right now for Safe Harbors New York City. Right now we're kind of trying to transition that position into something more so in the producing realm. I think that's really where my strong suit is. Over the past year, during COVID-19, we lost our managing director, who was also my father, which was Kevin Tarrant, who also was the person who wrote that song that kind of was the introduction to this. And so because of that, I kind of just stepped into the place to try to kind of hold the organization together in the meantime. And so since then, there's been a lot of learning curves and, just really kind of getting our infrastructure set as far as Safe Harbors. So I'm more so on the administrative side of Safe Harbors, but we are also all a part of the ensemble as well. So I'm also directing pieces with Safe Harbors in our ensemble. I'm also in other people's pieces. And then at the same time, also encouraging and trying to produce and uplift each other's work. And yeah, really, this was Muriel, who's my mother, her vision in the beginning. And then I kind of just came in later during the Reflections of Native Voices Festival is really when I started to step into the organization. Other than that, I really was just, working as an actor and, just trying to do my own thing and figuring out what I was going to do. But I feel that there's a lot of freedom in Safe Harbors in that sense.
Yeah.
To explore, and I think that's really the beauty of it is community, and it's community who wants to explore, who wants to think about different ways of approaching things, right? A lot of times we talk about decolonizing this and but it's very difficult to do that because we are, right? Like I have, like, my skill sets have been, not that I'm completely dependent on them as an artist, but the craftsmanship of my beginnings of getting into things were through a colonized lens. And there was a lot of issues with that, I think.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of issues for a lot of us in that sense, right? But like, what is that balance, right? At the same time, you don't want to throw away people's craftsmanship and mastery that they've put years and work into to understand and to articulate. And I think that's kind of where we're at, is like, what does that really mean, right? We can't just drop everything. You can't just get rid of it. You know what I mean? You're a Meisner person. You are a Meisner person. But how do we kind of,
How do you make the lemonade? How do you
Yes.
some lemonade? Come on,
Right.
do what we do best.
Yes.
Manifest the opportunity. Craft it and mold it so that there's something, because I think what you're uplifting in so many ways is just like there is a system that we live inside of that we have all found comfort in, and it's discomfort, right? And that system that we found comfort in, there is a question that's at the table of how do we integrate? And I think we talked about this in our even before this. How do we integrate our indigenous practice, our indigeneity into this system, and understanding that sometimes we demonize it, and I'll use the word capitalism. We call capitalism a very dirty word, when actually it's not capitalism that's necessarily dirty. It's the human conditioning towards capitalism. It is how the American, in particular, how the American society has structured capitalism and has defined it, that has actually made it dirty. It's not the trading of stuff. We're trading right now. Yeah. We're trading intellect. We're trading ideas. We're building that intellect to create a body of wealth knowledge, right? That wealth knowledge is something that we hope to transmit to the future generation. And when we think about the fact that this is going to be recorded, this is being telecasted, this is actually creating a mechanism for exchange. And yet, the word capitalism has such a dirty apparatus to it. And I think what you're getting at, which I think I really appreciate, is how do we challenge and own the fact that we have all been conditioned by this mechanism. We've all been washed by this mechanism that is horrific, that has genocide, that has blood on it, that has hurtful frames inside of it. However, it also has the possibility for us to find our common stance, and that we have to do that internal work in order to make that happen. Thinking about that, a question I have for you is, like, for the both of you is, and whoever might want to answer, but defining solidarity. What does solidarity mean to you? Knowing that this session is really talking about allyship, what does solidarity look like? And what are the things that people have to be willing to be courageous about in order for solidarity to actually be at the table versus be a lip service?
I think I'm ready to jump right in there, because what I'm thinking of immediately, I think, is accepting us as human beings, right? So often I feel that needs to be put on the forefront, because when we're talking about, right, these systems that we've been in, all of these things that affect us, all these intersectionalities that make us who we are, which I think in particular people of color, we're a part of all of these intersections with different identities and different communities. And a lot of times I think that can be difficult to understand. It's like, but how can you be that when you're that? You know what I mean? How could you be a native lesbian who gave birth to a child? That doesn't make sense. It's like, but it makes sense to us, right? And so it's like, I think that's a big part of it, is the acceptance of, like, you know, when we welcome people into our communities, and we really welcome them into our communities, and we welcome them into our conversations. But it's almost that same careful balance where it's like, you are welcomed here and we're bringing you in here and we appreciate your input. But sometimes you get comments that are like, well, why do you guys fight? You guys shouldn't be fighting. You guys should all be on the same side. And it's like, there's community, you know, rivalries that have been going on for generations, that it's really, that's not something that's going to be solved in this one meeting with you. You know what I mean? I appreciate you caring, and, you know, I agree, we shouldn't be fighting, but it happens. So accept us as human beings, that this is human nature. These are human traits. And that's what happens. People get excited. They start to argue, and you know what I mean? And sometimes that's just what it is. And I don't want to say like arguing. I think it's just the same with everything, like just accepting us for what we are at the current state, right? Like, I feel as Native people or Indigenous people in the entertainment industry, I mean, we are the first for everything right now. You know, Reservation Dogs is out right now. Rutherford Falls came out before that. These are the first of their kind in 2021. And a pandemic had to start for it to happen, right? And it's just like, so we are trying to figure it out. There's a lot of things we're trying to figure out when we're talking about boarding schools and these bodies and all of the things that are attached to it's not just our communities, it's lots of communities across the country that have been so deeply affected by genocide and oppression. We are really still recovering. We're like just starting to get our footing to be able to like figure it out, or even to dream that far ahead. And so I wish a lot of times when I think of solidarity that they would just encourage and uplift our dreams and what we're hoping for, and not try to put us back in reality. Sometimes people feel to check us like, okay, but you know, there's not a good chance. And it's like, look, we don't have a lot. So if somebody's like, I'm going to win an Oscar and I'm going to win a Tony, let them dream, let them make that their goal. There's no reason, I feel, to bring it, I think, to stifle those dreams down, because the world does that for us enough, you know.
And something that you're uplifting, and I'll come from my own cultural practice, and maybe there is a term inside of the Native community that could actually, so we can center it. But what you're making me think of is how, and for Black folks, we need the space to be Afrofuturists. We need the space. We need the space to like dream in to a future that allows for us to not forget the past, as I have James Baldwin behind me, not forget the ancestry that's behind me, or that it's in my present space, right? But also take all of that good juju, or all of that juju, and actually say, well, why don't I plan it in the future? What happens if I take that juju and put it into the future, cast myself into the future, own that space of what that future looks like, and then I'm given the space to not only just dream it, but to start to manifest it, right? I start to have the space and tools to manifest that future now, and have society bend to that will. And I'm wondering, is there a term similar to that kind of concept that we can lean into for this? Because I use Afrofuturism just because it's probably a well-known term, but I think also it's what I can speak to when I think about the beautiful solidarity mandate you're asking for folks to do. Is there something similar inside of Native communities that we can uplift, but also like, does that feel right?
Well, I think it's important to understand too, and I think this is what happens when we talk about solidarity, is that when you're coming into our communities, you're our guest.
Yes.
And people don't understand that, right? So they weigh in onto a conversation that you say, and then sometimes you're bringing someone in as a guest, right? They want to be allies, they want to work with you, they want to fight for you, but then they go into this mode that you say that's cringeworthy, because you as a Native person brought this person in there, and you want to almost say, when you get them on the side, and I've said this, me and you get along, but this isn't We Are the World. Like, you start talking like this in front of 20 Indians, like that.
We're going to have a problem.
We're going to have a problem. They go, oh, no, okay. And then they pop off, and it's the end, and you sit there and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to let them sit in that feeling, be hurt, whatever, because now you brought that whiteness into this room, and you'll see where people of my community in particular, why we're still hurt.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then it's like, you're a bunch of racists. Well, how are we a bunch of racists? Like, you came into us,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you said that to us, you know, you you triggered us,
Yeah.
and we react, and now it's poor you, and we have to comfort you.
Yeah. And I think that what I also just want to uplift, and I want to deep dive deeper, but I think you bring up a very powerful critique that also needs to be, I want to also broaden it just a little bit. When you said you brought this whiteness into our community, and I just want to broaden it and say that, like, me as a BIPOC person can bring a whiteness sensibility to a conversation which is equally as violent, right? Yeah. That is not necessarily, it's not necessarily saying that it's only people of white skinned or from white heritage. It is folks who have adopted and have prescribed and pray to the religion that is whiteness. And say that that's how they're going to navigate. So I just want it, as folks are listening, as folks are tuning in, I don't want to, we all have work to do on this path. And I hope that throughout this conversation, you'll check me if I say something that is bringing quote unquote whiteness into the conversation, because I will take it from a space of love. I'm not perfect. I'm searching for a space of divinity, but I'm not a perfect human. So I also have places to learn. But I just wanted to tease that open a little bit more. But I want to give the floor back to you. But I just want folks to really be listening to this, not thinking that all have places to grow.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's there are cool allies and very cool solidarity I've had with theater makers, because I come from a very long line of theater, who get it, who absolutely get it. And they say, and one of those people that really gets it and understands is someone like Morgan Janice. If you know Morgan, she is willing to listen, hear it, take the criticism. She knows what she is when she comes into the room. She gets it. So you don't have to pull her on the side. And, you know, she corrected me once. I was like, what? We were working together. And I asked her a question in front of all these Indians, and she wouldn't answer me. And then later on, she goes, don't do that, Muriel, because you have to understand, I'm white. And I said, I was like, what? She goes, they're going to act like, you know, I'm telling you what to do. I'm not. We're collaborating. So, you know, there are, you know, I've had people at La Mama who really get it. New York. There are people who get it. There are people who said to me, these are particular people who said to me, you know what, Muriel, I like the land acknowledgement thing, and we'll do it if you're asking this for us, but what else do you need? And that's when I started really thinking beyond land acknowledgement.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, we just have to acknowledge that, right? Yeah. So what does that mean? And beyond, we need programming, we need community services in theater. We really saw this during COVID.
Yeah.
We really saw this during COVID, what communities need across the country, but not only in Native communities, but a lot of people of color. What this pandemic has brought in historical memory, historical trauma, and blood memory to us that is unreal.
Yeah.
That is unreal, because we have gone back to remembering burying people one after another, and we used to say, God, what is that like? And now we're remembering it.
And also what genocide was, and structural.
What genocide was. Yes.
And what structural like warfare looks like, and what also and the memory, and you know what's really powerful. And I'll shut up. I'll be quiet because I know there's a response that I'm interrupting. I just want to say that, like, the pause of the shutdown was a kind of sacred obligation that brought on a lot of discomfort, because the engine wasn't able to display or disperse its energy. You had to sit with self. That's why a lot of relationships are no longer relationships right now. That's why the ones who lasted, they are getting married like tomorrow. Like, you know what I mean? There's a reason why the space in which this pandemic was a gift, but also was a cleanser, what also was horrific, right? And I think that if we don't look at the holistic nature of it, we're not actually giving the universe credit for creating balance. There is balance found in tragedy. There is balance. I say this, and you know, one day it might get me in trouble, but I think it's important. If slavery had never had happened, if Black bodies were ripped from the shores of Africa, we wouldn't have peanut butter, we wouldn't have a light bulb, we wouldn't have touched the moon. That the horrific nature of slavery, which we are still reaping the reeling ramifications of, generated the mechanism for a wisdom that changed the cultural and the psychological and the economical apparatus of humanity forever. And that wouldn't have happened if that horrific thing, and that's the universe creating balance from in my vantage point. That's the universe saying there's balance inside. Soul food comes out of that balance inside that mechanism. So, and I'm really just trying to really speak from my cultural practice to try to also inspire dialogue that lends from your, because I'm whatever. So I just wanted to lean into that as we move forward in this conversation.
Well, also, I just want.
Oh, I was
go ahead. You go, Mom. I mean, Josie.
That, you know, I think that's the thing is, you know, I have a friend who I consider a brother, and like, you know, when we were really grieving, he would call me and he would always be like, you know, sister, like we're just spiritual, like that's just what we are, and that's what you got to realize, like us as Native people, we're meant to be spiritual. And like I remember thinking like, but everybody's spiritual, and I do think that it's a broader spectrum than that, you know what I mean? But I remember like not like just putting that in my head, like what does that mean, you know what I mean? What does he mean we're just spiritual? And it's like you start to understand that, because you're like, yeah, we are, you know. I think, you know, you can't speak for everybody, but I think as a lot of indigenous peoples or people who come from indigenous roots or BIPOC folks, however it is you want to kind of, you know, put it, people of melanin, you know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways that you can put it. I think we do have that because we've been through so much. We have this spirituality that we kind of call on in a lot of ways. And I think for Native people, we definitely, that is something that is very, very much a part of our culture, because it's one of the very small things that we've been able to like grasp on. And even then, a lot of it got lost in translation, right? Through colonization. So I think when it comes to, I was just kind of bringing it back to the solidarity of people entering into your community. There's so many protocols in our community, right? That are spoken or unspoken. And I think that's a little bit of where that balance comes from, is being open to those criticisms, because as Native people, we've all been criticized by elders. We've all been criticized by other people who have told us, hey, don't do that. Why are you acting like that? What are you doing? Like, and they really will say that to you, and they're not going to feel bad. They're like, I know your parents. I know your grandparents. Why are you acting cool right now? Right. And that's the same for so many communities. So I think when we bring guests in, we expect that same respect of like, if somebody reprimands you or says something to you and they're a person who's a respected person in that community, you should listen to that. You can't argue and say, well, insert yourself and say, well, I think no one should be fighting. Well, they're saying you need to be quiet because this isn't something for you to solve, right? Or whatever the issue is, right? You're going the wrong way around a circle. You're participating in something that's not for you to participate in. I mean, there's so many protocols, but I think that's one of the larger things as well, is respecting those protocols, right? And it can be, I think it feels strange for people. I think it feels very strange if you've never done those things before, right? Like I feel like as a Native person, I'll go to things that are not Native, but it'll be other, you know, Black or brown folks who are friends of mine. And I'm like, okay, I get it, right? Like, let's just be quiet. Okay, I'm just going to do what everyone else is doing. Everyone else is going this way. I'm going to go this way. I asked my friend, where should I go? They say, come with me. And you know what I mean? And that's because I have those protocols like, okay, let me see what everyone's doing. Let me not just, you know,
insert myself.
What do I do? I don't know what to do. I've never been here. You know, that's the kind of thing. Like, I think I was just trying to bring it to that. I think in the sense of like, there's protocols with our spirituality, and that very much goes into our everyday lives and how we engage with each other. And I think that's not just our community, that's every community.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just
No,
saying,
I
I would
agree.
love more of those cross
Yeah.
community conversations. You know what I mean? Because the more you learn about these other cultures, you see such similarities in
Yes.
other native cultures, and you're like, oh, so this all makes sense. And when it's sometimes a little bit disturbing to me, because I'm like, why did I never know this? Why
Yeah.
was I so busy finding out what a Seder is? Why was I so busy? You know what I mean? Like, that's never, like, this is not a thing for me. Like, all these other people, like, these are things that actually are connected to each other. I think, I think especially when you think about like Caribbean spirituality, like all up and down the South, like it's incredible. But I just think that's something. Mom, I think you were going to say something.
No, I agree. It's like how we're all connected, and during the COVID especially, I had to rely, I lost my husband. So, and it was devastating. And I could not figure out how to mourn, right? Because we were in COVID, right? So I had to seriously rely on my community, which was my family. I had to really if you say it any other word, my clan, really, because we all come from the same clan, and people who were just, on the phone, what do you need? Just call me in the middle of the night. That is what, and not everyone was native, you know what I mean? So these were people who were in solidarity with me. But when we talk about COVID and we talk about that type of reliving of what does that mean? What does that mean? Is it worth for people to act right, to have all of these deaths?
Yeah.
This is my problem. I say this all the time. I say, all right, you're seeing us now on television, but was it worth half of our community to be decimated for that to happen, for people to understand us?
Yeah.
Was one good man in the community, my husband, worth it?
Yeah.
And so that is the thing, but also remembering that we're human beings. And I think that's what brought us all down to this one level, that we are human beings, and we're not superhuman. We're not immortals, and we can't solve the world. We can do what we can within our communities and with ourselves to continue to work, continue to use that light that you have, that was given to you as a gift that was to the Creator, right? And I truly believe everyone has a gift from the Creator, and each person is given a job from the Creator. That's the way I was taught. And when you are not on your path, when you're not on your path. And there are elders who will say to you, you should think about doing this, and you do it because sometimes you're not great at everything. And that is kind of how I work rooms. I was saying this, like one of the things I was taught through traditional leadership is that everybody there's a thing called collective, I forget, what do I call it, Josephine? Where it's a collective diplomacy in a way. I can't remember but it's like a collective leadership of a decision. So everybody in around, I take in what everybody has to say as a leader, or as a director. I take what everyone has to say, something that is very, very important, right? And we try to all agree. Now, if we don't agree, I give an option to that person to say, okay, you don't agree. Can you tell me why? And you let that person talk it through. Either they convince us or they don't convince us.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, I have to make the final decision in a diplomatic, balanced way. And this is how I direct, because I think of us as, how I see it is, I see us as a clan, as the ensemble. And then from there, we have the people who have their jobs. So it's like a village, and then the play itself is the village that we are working under. And after that village or territory we're working under, right, there are all these different things everyone has all these different jobs. So my job is that I have to talk to a lighting designer. I have to talk to a coach, but they all have to have the same the same vision I do, or it's for me to say, okay, now we all have to collectively work together to make that work through. And that's how I see it traditionally. And that's how I was taught through Spider-Woman too. You know, what does that mean? What does that mean? And when people come into our circles, you know, there are people who've said, wow, you know, Indians talk a lot. And I don't say anything sometimes. And I'm not from that generation that says something all the time. But I have people like my daughter's generation right away will call it. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, we're calling this. We're calling it.
I mean,
here we go.
yeah. Go ahead, Jonathan.
No, just no.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, you know, like what you were talking about, that the stagnation of the pandemic and just sitting still. I think for people of my generation, and I don't like, because I don't want to be like an ageist, you know what I mean? There's all the, I don't want to be the ist, I don't want to be racist.
We don't need to put that in the room.
Exactly. But, you know, I think the stillness of it really just brought to light. I mean, obviously you see all of the things that have come to light, the good, the bad, and the ugly, really through this pandemic, right? And I think one of the things was trying to get back into the groove of things, like, okay, so we're going to start doing Zoom plays. Okay, we're going to start doing Zoom readings. Okay, we're going to start meeting in person a little bit. And you start to meet in person. And then all of a sudden, like, you've had all this time. I mean, particularly for us, because we lost somebody, but I think a lot of people lost somebody who they cared about during this pandemic. And now it's like on the forefront, like, wow, this person never got this and they never got this. And how come these people are allowed to talk to them like this? And so all of a sudden, all of these thoughts are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I took that. I can't believe I didn't say anything. I can't believe so-and-so did it. And like all these little things, and getting back into like the rolling of like, okay, we're doing theater again. Here we go again. And it's still the same, where people are trying to function in that same kind of oppressive way. You're just like, excuse me? Like, who are you talking to? And I think a lot of people have that reaction where it's like, why are we taking this shit? Like, you need me. I'm the young person. You're asking me for the vision right now. And then you're talking shit to me like I'm nobody, but you're taking my ideas. And I'm not that I'm the only young person who like there's a lot of people who have brilliant stories, and it's happening fast, and you can see it happening fast. People, they want the BIPOC, they want to check those boxes off. So it's like, okay, so who needs who?
Yeah. And I mean, I think you brought up something around, we all lost somebody, and I think it's also to go a little bit deeper. Yet again, some of us lost ourselves throughout this pandemic.
Yeah.
The loss wasn't necessarily a loved one. The loved one could have been us. The reflection, our access to who we were and where we want to be, and like and then thinking about allyship and thinking about how you navigate, how do you get back to being that person again, right? How do you get back to having a conversation with, like, some people didn't get a hug for a year. I sit with that. I sit with the fact that some people found grief as an isolating tool, right? They never got to practice their grieving process. They were by themselves inside of it. I do want to make everyone know who's out there in the universe listening into this fantastic conversation. You might want to send a question. We're here to answer, and please send them. Put it in the comments. We will try to get to as many of them as possible. But I think this idea of death or decease, and I want to send condolences, love, and light to both of you in the midst of your probably still healing process. And I know the kind of position your father, your husband held, and just want to send my deepest condolences for that, and for that to happen during the pandemic. I can only imagine what that means. So I know a lot of people send so much love and light both of your ways, as you are showing up with a lot of love and light and gracious grace. So just want to say that. And thinking about like what is possible, and thinking about what might be needed as you talk reopening.
Yeah.
What is needed for reopening to start to speak integrity and speak and walk the walk that was talked during the pandemic? Mm-hmm. What does reopening need to look like? And can you start to articulate that for us so that we can start to utilize that as a mandate tool or a North Star to build towards as we think about how we integrate Indigenous communities, BIPOC people in general, and start to think about how do we create healthy reopening strategies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of things happen during the pandemic, right? There was a great shine of what was happening, not only in our community, but communities across the United States, right? Where you said to yourself, oh, this is prophecy in making. People talked about it. Religion, this is the time. This is the time. And my husband in particular talked about there was a time where there was going to be, you're on one path or another path. And one path was for, I'm not going to name it now, but one path was for those who aren't for the land, only for themselves and not for the community. And they might, and then the other path is for those who are for everybody, not for everybody, but are understand the spiritual journey that you're taking as a human being and understanding what the community needs. And you're always thinking about the land. And you see, I never saw that prophecy so clear. So clear during the pandemic. I was like, this is unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
This is things that was said to me since I was a little kid. Yeah. And I saw it so, and it was always, and then I've had other leaders say, there is going to be a time when people are going to rely on us as Native people to help them survive.
Ashe, yes.
Because a lot of communities have lost what we instinctively know.
Yes.
So you see a different, like
you go back, even if you go back to like Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler had these three things she said y'all need to do because the future's coming and the future don't look so good. It's apocalyptic. You need to be able to cook and make your own food.
Yep.
Yeah. You need to be able to filter your own water.
100%.
And you need to be able to shoot a gun.
Yep.
Yep.
Now, not condoning violence.
I know.
If you're not able to do those three things, when the rapture comes, you won't be ready.
That's right.
And when I think about Indigenous communities and I think about Indigenous people, I think of people who have withstand a rapture that is continuously happening and forging through it through a disinvested system that has delocated them to being almost wanting to be endangered species. And the resilience of that spirit has activated those three things, right?
Yes,
has activated those three systems.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about that, Mary, it made me think 100% of that wisdom Octavia pins and tells us, hey, this is where we need to go. Hey, this is where we can forecast ourselves into the future. Hey, we need to start doing that now.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to start doing that now. So what you're forecasting is a wisdom that a sister is saying, hey, we need to look, and you're giving us a potential North Star towards it.
Yeah. Yes, no, I love that. I love that. I do too. It sounds a little apocalyptic sometimes, so I'm like, should we say it? But I'm like, listen, Black and brown folks got the answer, okay? And y'all are gonna really be wanting to know what these answers are, so you better start getting quick now, because we're gonna be out on our own, and it's gonna be what it is. Because I think when you were speaking, Muriel, and then when you followed up about Octavia's quote, that's exactly what I was thinking. See, we're aligned.
We're having unified separate location.
No, because the first thing I thought, I said the North Star, what's the guide? I said first would have to be the water for me, because 100% the water needs healing right now. It makes me like emotional to think about it, because our time is so limited.
And that empathy is what creates the progress, right? Like that deep empathy for understanding what Mother Earth is actually churning on a consistent basis for us to have an ounce of one more year.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and understanding what the labor that entails, right?
Ashe.
And how important that is.
Yes.
Our fresh waterways. Without fresh waterways, you have no bottled water. Even with a filter, you know what I mean? So I think about the water. I'm like, the water is the most, like, we have to like give our all right now. Like right now they're trying to stop line 3, and it's like we have to put all hands in on that, because it's literally going to tear apart the way we're living, how comfortably we're living. And I think second, I would put the land, because obviously the water affects the land. And I think that goes into growing your own food, learning how to grow your own food, learning how to nourish yourself properly. You know what I mean? And learning how to take care of your surroundings. And I think third, that goes into the community, because all of these things, for me as a Indigenous woman or a Native woman, it's all interconnected, right?
Yes.
It starts with the water. If the water's not healthy, the land can't be healthy. If the land's not healthy, the community can't be healthy. And that starts with uplifting the community. And it's almost like that's the order, but we have to do it backwards. We have to start by uplifting community, start by encouraging them, start by telling them that what they're doing is enough, and continue to fight, however that is, whether it's artistically, creatively, whether they're on the front lines, whether they're walking, whatever it is, trying to get an education. That's fighting. That's an act of resistance. It's unfortunate that that has to be an act of resistance, but even us supporting each other and having these conversations are, because in the reality, this world and this system that we're in right now was not created for us to thrive.
And what's so beautiful about what you're uplifting inside the idea of protection, right? I go back to that third thing that Octavia says we must learn how to fire a gun, right? She's asking us to have and you're asking us, and you're talking about protection. She's asking us to take something that was not inherently given to us as a right. That amendment that was said, the bear arms, did not think about people of color. Absolutely. It did not position people of color to actually bear arms. And so she's asking us to have a conversation around, what does it mean to self-protect, self-govern? What does it mean to actually allow for the body? Because it's not necessarily violence that I don't think she's necessarily saying. What she might be potentially saying, if I was to pause it and think about it, and what you're saying, which I love, which helps me, you're helping me in this moment to think about it in a broader context. I think it's really healthy and important, is that the protection that we actually need to be looking at as people of color is how do we self-govern instead of allowing for a government to govern us? Absolutely. And how do we allow for that self-governance to allow for people and all of us to show up in our wholeness and not to be fragmented by the system that consistently marginalizes who we are and then says who's valuable, who isn't valuable. Exactly. Hence the amendment that had to be made that we're all here to celebrate, that allowed for women the right to vote, but only a certain sect of women the right to vote.
Yeah. And I'm a true believer in our native sovereignty, right? And our sovereignty means a lot. And everyone is born with a sovereign right, as Suzanne Harjo would say. Everybody is born with that sovereign right. So I see it too, is that what we have to start thinking, there's a difference between being, okay, let's say we're on a river. You're on a river and you're rented the boat, and it's going one way, right? But it's like you don't own that boat on this river. There's a difference between being on the boat where you own the boat. You know, everyone collectively built the boat, owned the boat, and going down this river. There is a difference between that. It's liquid. Yes. It's liquid. Yes. I don't know how to explain it any other way. It's liquid. And you say that to people and they just look at you, because that is where I eventually want to go. I eventually want to go, if we go back to the arts, for National Native Theater, for, our own television Native channel, right?
Yes.
Why not? And if something fails, it fails, man. Yeah. What happens is that, we give this to this one Indian and it didn't work. Okay, we'll never do that again. Yeah.
And so, or the opposite. I think. Well, I do have to. Yeah, sorry. We started downloading. It all happened. The magic started downloading, but we do, as the systems of time are coming to an end. Yes. We do have to round out. But what I would just say as a closing point, which I think is really important, is that the Indigenous body needs to be able to fail up and fail with resources. Yeah. and fail as many times as it needs to, because the quantum leap of the white psyche has been able to fail for generations, for centuries, and still been able to have the economic resources to go forward. Okay. 2 is that water is the vibration that we need to start to point our toes towards and really start to be able, if I was to take, water, if we were to learn how to protect water, we might learn how to protect our society. That we don't need to be looking at space more so, we need to be looking at the ground in which we are actually standing on and figuring out how do we invest in this sacred, holy place that is our home, right? It's our first home. It's our mother home. And then for everyone who joined us today, really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna hand it back. It was a pleasure. I greatly appreciate both of you deeply. Without further ado, I pass the floor back over to Alex to take us home.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, Josie, and Marielle, for today's wonderful conversation. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexis Gonzalez, and I am the Program Coordinator for Audience Development and Engagement at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Latino male with short black hair, and I'm wearing an olive green shirt, and I'm sitting in front of a beige backboard. I'm joining you today from Los Angeles, California, the land of the Tongva and Gabrieleño people and the Actechemin and Juaneño nations who have lived and continue to live here. I also want to recognize and pay respect to the Tongva and Actechemin nations and their spiritual connection as the first stewards and traditional caretakers of this land. Thank you to our brilliant and generous panelists today and to our audience for joining us today for the 100 Years, 100 Women conversation series hosted by Park Avenue Armory and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. All of the panels will be archived in the 100 Years, 100 Women website, which you can find at 100years100women.net. We hope to see you at our next and final conversation on Friday, August 27th, and encourage you to visit our website to learn more about the 100 Years, 100 Women project, the commission artists and their work, and resources and related programming currently offered by our partner institutions. Without further ado, we will end today with Our Sisters, Daughters, and Mothers, a Southeastern Woodlands contemporary women's honor song created and recorded by Martha Redbone.
Whoa, where